Okay, hey all. Talk a little bit about passing traffic through now, and the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that I've actually removed the HA firewall, in keeping with my peers who would appear, basically because I run out of compute on my ancient workstation, and as a result I saw a lot of issues with EVE-NG when I had the two running together. So we're going to drop down to the original model, which is the same as everybody else does, which is the one firewall here. Okay, so HA is all well and good, but if you can't pass traffic, then it's absolutely useless. Well, actually, it's the most secure thing in the world, you know what I mean? But it's going to get you a P45 fairly quickly. So we're going to look at north and south, which is essentially this way, and east and west, which is this way. So we've got our PC in our internal LAN, and we have our DC on our server LAN, and our DC has access out, as you'll see, through this way, and our PC does as well, and it also has access across this way that is controlled. So we're going to look first at a bad example of a rule, and then we're going to look at a good example of a rule, essentially addressing the issues that some people have with getting traffic through Palo Altos when they approach it as a packet filter and not a security device, as it is. Okay, so you can see here we have bad rule, and this is greyed out. So I've looked at all this. This is our rule base that's controlling the east-west. Just going to show you quickly the there we go. So this is the test box we've got, the Windows 10 box. As you can see at the minute, we can search for Cisco all day long, and as Palo would probably like, we can't find them, can't find anything. We do, however, if you notice in the bottom, have internet access, and that's because we've still got DNS, so we can still do a DNS lookup. Okay, so go back to this. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to just have a quick look at bad rule. Going to enable that, and you can see what I've got is I've got an internal LAN, which is why our box is on, going external zone, and I'm allowing DNS, HTTP and HTTPS, which in reality seems rather secure. I mean, I'm only allowing HTTP, I'm only allowing HTTPS. What you got to understand about service objects is that they're simply IP and port based. So we'll commit that, and then as that's committing, I'll sort of draw attention to underneath here. So browsing is the rule that I built up and created an application group, and then you'll notice it's got application defaults after it. We'll go into that shortly. So go back now and you can see it's already sprung into life, and that's due to Chrome doing what it does, which is just cracking on in the background regardless of what you tell it to do. It will just quite merrily go on and try and contact whoever, and you can see we can browse quite easily and actually quite quickly, bearing in mind it's through the EVE-NG. Okay, but what this wouldn't do is if an attacker came in and compromised a web server and they got a Metasploit system and they wanted a interpreter session, or they just wanted a reverse shell, and they pulled that reverse shell back across 443 or 80 or even 53 for that matter, they would actually get through the firewall, because the firewall doesn't care at this point. It's not looking at anything, it's just saying, okay, you're going from here to here, and it's on that port, so it'd let it through. So that's not such a good idea. So moving back, what I want to do is I want to remove this rule, disable this one, and then enable this one, and commit. And then just before we go and look at the results of that on the Windows 10 box, I'll just show you. So we've got a load of warnings, and that's partially my fault, but it's an interesting thing. So within the browsing group, I have allowed Gmail video chat, so I've allowed the Gmail suite essentially, but I've got Google Mail base, as you'll see, and I've allowed Facebook, but for certain aspects of Facebook voice, Facebook chat, Gmail video chat, they are different. They're different applications. They're applications that are tunneled within the original application, and the Palo looks at that as well. So essentially, it looks at the protocol, and then using a decoder for that protocol, it looks at the protocol that's running inside that as well. So everything would work hunky-dory until you try to do video chat, and then it wouldn't work because the Palo would block it. So just before we go on, go to Objects, Application Groups. Okay, so in the browsing group, this is what we've got. Got Google Base, Gmail, Google Docs, and that's why it's complaining about that, because it's got other dependencies. SSL, that allows us to get to the HTTPS sites. DNS speaks for itself. Web browsing is port 80 and is a prereq for all web browsing. Facebook, and then we're allowing ping. Okay, and that was created simply by creating a group, test group, and you browse, and then you can see from there what you're doing. So if I look for web browsing, for instance, and search for that, it is rather annoyingly it will be web, where are you? Web browsing is there, and then if we click on it, it gives us an rundown of how risky they classify it as, and 4 is actually a fair assumption because it's completely unencrypted. It's plain text, so anything you put across it is going to be, if anybody's listening, they're going to be able to grab it and read it immediately. Goes into a brief description of what it is. Additional information, these are links you can click on if you want to. The standard ports that it uses, anything it depends on will be there, and anything it implicitly uses will be there. And then the deny action, in this particular case it's drop reset, so your client would see a reset come back from the firewall. And then if you wanted to add that to your new group, you just click that. Okay, and just so if we then look for Gmail as a for instance, so we go for Gmail and it includes Gmail base, but if we go for Gmail Drive and add that, we'll look at that, you can see it depends on Gmail base and Google base, and that basically means that you're going to require that to be added as well, otherwise it will not work. So I mean, you could just add Gmail. If you add Gmail, then you get Gmail base, phone, chat, enterprise, and video chat as well. So that's a quick way that you can create the application groups. Okay, so going back to our policies, so we now got our browsing, same again, internal LAN, external. Application defaults basically means that the firewall will ensure that the application it has identified is using the correct port. So for instance, if you want to get an RDP session and you are trying to do that over port 80, for instance, it will block it. Okay, so we'll commit that. Just got to say, I absolutely love Palo firewalls. I think they are arguably one of the best security devices out there. So now, if we go back to our Windows 10 box, go back into here, we can again browse and we're all good. Okay, so what I wanted to do was just to bring your attention to something. So basically, to demonstrate the fact that it is actually looking for the apps, if we go back to our policy for a minute and we go back into groups, browsing groups, okay, so we've got all the Google base, Facebook and so on here. What we haven't got, say for instance, is pulling something out of the air, Tumblr. Okay, so we haven't got Tumblr. So if we go back here, so we can go to Facebook, and it will allow that. But if we try to go to Tumblr, site can't be reached, it was reset. So essentially what you're looking at is basically anything that you are going to need and the aspects of that you're going to need. So say for instance, if you want to control Facebook so people can post stuff but they can't use the video chat, then you would drop the video chat part out of it. The rest of it would work. Where the frustration comes in and you end up with the bad rule, if I can just come back to the bad rule. So the bad rule is the fact that building these up can sometimes be an absolute nightmare. There is an auditing process that you have to go through, I think, when you transition from any other firewall to a Palo Alto, based on the fact that you're now no longer allowing just the port, you are now allowing the application. So where previously majority of people would say, okay, well, we need to use this application, from a firewall perspective, usually it's 443 or it's 80. Or if it is a proprietary port, it is like WebEx, for instance. WebEx is tunneling stuff through 443 and it's encrypted anyway. You would then have to go to blocking that on a proxy. Personally, I do strongly believe in the idea of having the one box to look at all that traffic, and the way that Palo works obviously is a lot more efficient than other firewalls because of the single pass architecture. So just to draw a little, so that's north and south. So if we then go down to AD services, so coming back to our diagram, and just to clear this up, that 7206 is literally just to go out there because I just had a nightmare with EVE-NG. So if anybody's using EVE-NG and you find that you keep losing connectivity to everything because you're all on the management network, take the stuff off the management network cloud. So if you come up here, networks, don't have loads of things on this, because you literally start losing access to everything, and it turned into a nightmare for me. Okay, so this is my home LAN, so that I can get onto the management whenever I screw it up, which is on a regular basis. This just controls the route into that. That is basically the Palo's gateway, and that goes out to a NAT address there. These are, as the names would suggest, VM nets. I literally have no consistency at all, do I? VM nets and the PC and the DC are on those. again, Active Directory, and I want to draw everybody's attention to this because it screwed me up a minute ago. So if I look at Active Directory, oh wow, more coffee I think. Look at Active Directory and we look, and you would think, and I'm sure there's a reason for this, and in fact actually looking at SMB being there is a reason for it, because there's lots of stuff that you'd want to move out, but you'd want to have a general rule for Active Directory. You do still need to add the LDAP, MSDS SMB, remote procedure call, and NetBIOS to it, and that is where this is. So again, to clear that up, what I would do is I would create a group. I would create a group based on that for the Active Directory, pop it in there, that would include all of those, and then you know you're covered. I mean, ping wasn't part of that, but ping is always useful for troubleshooting activities. And so this is part of the whole zero trust north. So you got north south and then east west zero trust, and essentially, in traditional models, you basically had everything coming to the DMZ was untrusted, that's fine. Everything coming out the DMZ into the internal network was untrusted, and that was fine. But once you got onto internal networks, everything was just okay. It's just, right, just crack on. You know, you need to go there and you need to go there, and that's fine. When this started to fall down, it started to fall apart quite some time ago, when people realised that they could pivot. So they would essentially, you would come off of a web server which is in the DMZ, it would then have multi-homed interfaces on it. So essentially you've got the front end, and then going to the back for the separation for its DB server or whatever, it would have another route. That would be really easy to find, and you could pivot from that, and then once you'd hit a box inside, well, you were good to go. You could just go wherever you wanted, and you could look at, you know, the ARC table, routing table, wherever you wanted to do. So the idea now is to literally give just as much access as is absolutely required, and nothing else. And moving forward, I mean, this essentially is PCNSA, really. If you don't know how to put a rule into a Palo, then, you know, it's not ideal. Let's put it that way. To try and take PCNSE. But what I wanted to do is wanted to go into it in depth, because I think it will help. We'll be doing a video soon, possibly next, now that I've got my AD all set up, using user-based rules, where you would then group users by what they do. Essentially what you need to do is you need to move away from the IP address. The IP address is neither here nor there. You can spoof an IP address, you can anybody could be plugged into it. If they just pick up that IP address, they've got that IP address. All of this is to be able to get to a point where you can pinpoint who it was that accessed what resources and what they did whilst they was there, and if they're doing something they shouldn't be doing. So if you've got an accountant and they suddenly start accessing your databases, or they suddenly start accessing firewalls, that's out of the ordinary. That's not something they should normally be doing. So you could group all your users, and then wherever all your users are in the organization, you can then give them the access based on who they are, as opposed to where they're plugged into. And I think that is definitely the way forward. It has to be the way forward, and it also makes people think about other stuff, so like password sharing and so on, because now it's a case of we know who it was that was doing it. So just a quick one before wandering off. NAT. Just to quickly show the NAT policy. So the browsing traffic, so internal one, an internal LAN, which is my two zones. If I can click on the right one, my two zones here. So I have my internal LAN where my hosts sit, and then internal one where my servers are sitting currently, and they go into external zone. They're using the default router, dynamic IP and port, which allows oversubscription, so it's equivalent of hide NAT or Cisco overload NAT, whatever you want to call it. It's dynamic IP and port. Told it to use Ethernet 1.1, which is the external interface, and then to use the external address. If you used dynamic IP, it would not translate the port, and it would just look for the next IP in your address pool. We're not translating anything at the destination because there's no destination translation. We're not doing anything like that. We'll have a look at more to do in that later, because that does come up quite a lot. And that's really it for this one. That's done. So at the risk of sounding a bit like your average YouTuber, if you could like and subscribe, that would be absolutely awesome. And I will start working on the next one. I think actually the next one I'll do the user-based access. I'm kind of dropping into difficult territory here with the image that I have, so I do need to look into very much the AWS so that we can use the trial licenses up there. Okay, alright, well, thank you for watching. If you've watched this far, well done, and I'll see you next time.